My name's John Garrett. I've got 20 years of MSc imaging, multi-vendor, multi-modality. I didn't think about the fact that one person in this room is going to know this company that I started with, which was Service Trends. And David and I started Service Trends together. How long ago was that, David? Long time ago. David still is like 30, so. But one of these things that I want to point out is we talking about talking to each other. Anybody see here at the show? It's a small world. We started in '95 together. It's come full circle. We're running into each other again. Not on purpose. That's just how this business goes. If you've been around a while, understand you keep seeing the same people over and over. We're a small part of the population in the United States. Okay, so I actually got my electronics background in the Navy. I went to the Navy schools. That's where I started when I came out. Tried to be a salesman. I found out I don't lie well enough to be a salesman. So,
or a politician.
Exactly. So I went into actually fixing machines, and I found my niche and really enjoyed the ride so far. Hopefully I'll enjoy it the rest of the way out. Director of Clinical Engineering for CHI. We have a couple others here that are from CHI, both directors and my heckling crew, which will be back in one. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Health and Human Services Management from Wilberforce University. Other than my people, does anyone know the significance of Wilberforce University? It is the oldest historically black college in the United States that is still open. Even though I'm not historically black, it has a great management program, and I was really proud to have experience there. I also have a Master's in Psychology. That's not as cool as it sounds. Okay, so let's start first of all with the stated purpose of why do we do preventive maintenance, because we're going to talk about a PM specialist, but what is the real purpose of this from the get-go, right? I mean, I think it's pretty fair to say that preventive maintenance is a periodic maintenance performed specifically to reduce the mean time to failure during normal use, right? Otherwise, the Navy was famous for taking things apart that didn't need to be taken apart, and you'd shorten the life of them because you're doing PM on equipment, right? The whole idea is we should be doing maintenance that helps equipment last longer so we can treat patients. It doesn't break down in the middle of the case. That's really the big thing there, right? If it breaks down at the end of the case, okay, we can get it repaired, we can move on with life. But we're in a medical field, so we specifically don't want it to break down in the middle of the patient being treated, because that causes all kinds of complications, no matter how simple the procedure. Let's talk about normal use. Normal use is when the unit has been used according to the manufacturer's operation manual. All of those of you who've been in a hospital know that some people in the hospital may look at that as a suggestion instead of a proper way to use it, right? They have their own ideas on how to use some things, and then they're surprised when they don't work. Okay? Preventative maintenance cannot prevent failure from misuse or abuse. I preach that, I preach it, and I tell you all to do the same thing. When you're educating the people who use the equipment, make sure they know that we can't predict, if you're going to hit it with a hammer, I can't prevent that from breaking. All right. So I'm going to look at this from the 30,000-foot view to start with, and then we'll go down and talk about some details. So, what does the PM specialist actually do? Well, preventive maintenance, right, on equipment. The specialist will do what a specialist is supposed to do, which in this case would be PMs. Repairs that can be done during a PM. Now, this gets, depending on the type of equipment we're talking about, this can be kind of a gray area sometimes, right? Depending on how long the PM is, will it keep you from completing the PM? Is it something you can do without extending the PM for an unreasonable amount of time? Documentation of all PMs. We just went through a CMS survey, and this is important. In case anybody in the room doesn't know, this is really, really, really important. My team, guys, what do I say? Have a great day, and that's what I tell them every day. Right? Document, document, document. So, what is a PM specialist not doing? This is just as important if you're going to actually implement a PM specialist as what they are doing. PM specialist does not cover after-hours repairs. That's a big stress because a A lot of what we're going to, spoiler alert, a little later, we're going to talk about when we should have a PM specialist working, which is not during working hours, right? That's the best use of a PM specialist. So a PM specialist does not perform repairs that are beyond completing the PM. So if I get into a piece of equipment, I find I have to order parts. That's not a PM specialist at that point. That has to be a turnover to the day crew to order parts and repair. Because the PM specialist, when you see the formula I'm going to show you later, it'll explain why this is the case, right? Because we have them as a specialist for a reason. It's just like if we have a imaging specialist, we typically don't have them sitting doing IV pumps for 2 or 3 days in a row, right? Because it's not cost effective. We're paying way too much money to sit and do IV pumps unless there's some special circumstance. Typically, we're going to have someone who's going to do pumps. It's not specialized on CT repair. Right? Including order circuit boards or replace an X-ray tube. I'm going to, just so we know, I'm going to talk a lot about imaging because my background is mostly imaging, but also because it's easier for me to run numbers. I have numbers that I've run in the past, and I'm just reusing those numbers later. But this can apply to any equipment that you can run the numbers on, and it makes sense. Okay?
Wouldn't it be cost effective though? You said that we cannot cover after hours, PMs after hours. Like in some cases, that's the only time you can get.
Oh, no, PMs, no. We should be doing PMs after hours, but we should be doing repairs.
Okay, yeah, repairs.
Right, repairs, right? So make sure we're clear on that. We're not going to perform repairs that are beyond completing a PM. So if we have something where we have to put a new filter in, or we have to put oh, look, this gasket's worn, I got to replace the gasket. It's not really on the PM, but I noticed it while I'm in here, right? Minor things like that, we're going to go ahead and do those repairs that we can do as part of the PM. But things are going to extend the PM on to the next day typically. Now again, these are not hard and fast rules. These are just the rules that make sense in the math that I'm going to do for you later. Decide later, hey, we're going to do it this way, or hey, you know what? We're a smaller place and we're only having to do PMs the first 6 months or every other month, and then every other month is going to do repairs. There's a lot of modification you can do to this. I'm just doing it for a very large hospital on a large scale. All right. And when you see the numbers, if you don't understand it once you see the numbers, we'll go even deeper so I can explain it so it makes a little more sense. Right? But that's correct. It makes sense after hours PMs. Okay, PM specialist does not cover vacations of staff. This has to do with, now again, you can make this your own thing, but typically if you're trying to make this a specialist, that's not what we're going to do. This PM specialist does not cover after hours repair. Now, I know I repeated it, but it's that important. All right. So let's talk about setting a PM specialist up. Now, if you have been doing this, the PMs that are for whatever equipment it is, whether it might be dialysis, imaging, whatever it is, you're going to know what those special tools are, right? Everyone knows someone who does MRI needs non-ferrous tools. So we have a basic tool set, we have specialty tools. I just listed a couple, but there's any number of specialty tools on any equipment that's going to be high-end enough that we're going to consider having somebody be a specialist as a PM on. Is that? Yeah. So exactly. Depending on what your field we're talking about, it's going to be that specialty. You want to make sure you're figuring that into your costs for setting up, and making sure it's available to the PM specialist as their own, as they were going to be doing this, and this is all they're going to be doing. Right? Training. Obviously, we need PM training. If we're doing more than just one item, we're going to have one model or one modality. And training is part of that setup. It's part of what allows them to succeed. I often say that training is another tool that we give the people who do the job. Actually being able to get your hands in and know how it's supposed to work, especially in more complex systems, that's another tool. You have that training, you have that experience. Okay, so full service training is acceptable on whatever the device is, but if you go downstairs this afternoon and you go talk to a lot of the reps that go talk down there who do any kind of training, they'll be happy to customize PM-only training for you. Right? Be happy to customize. I know this for a fact, as I've talked to several myself about this for future, being able to implement on a couple spaces. So you can get whatever kind of training you want if you're willing to negotiate, tell them, as long as you have a clear idea of what you want. Right? If you just go, hey, with your PM training, that's a little too big, right? If you know what models you need, if you know what type of equipment specifically, and let's face it, there's some things like microscopes, right? Microscopes, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but microscopes, if you get a good in-depth class on microscopes, you can work on a lot of different types of microscopes, right? But when you start talking about different dialysis machines, that's a little different story, right? Because they're a lot different. You talk about anesthesia machines, they're similar, but they're different. You want to make sure they're trained on those specific anesthesia machines, right?
Overall, has a good PM course.
Right.
It's spendy, but they have all of the different models.
Right. And see, that's exactly, you can get trained on all the different models for that particular modality. And so it's just a matter of looking, and you can find that training. Okay, documentation training. Now, again, I talk about documentation because I pound it, because that's what will cover you when something goes wrong. That's what will cover you when you're under inspection. But you want to make sure that you give the training for documentation on how you want the training done for your PM specialist. Everybody that comes through my shop, I sit down and we go through documentation training so they know what I want in documentation. And we sit down 6 months later and we go through it again because evidently they forgot. All right, and hospital safety training. This is something that a lot of people miss because this is going to be an off-shift person. They forget to teach them pass and race, or where the fire exits are, what the fire doors are, what's the procedure in your hospital for them in place, whatever, all that life safety stuff that we have to sit through with annual training. You want to make sure that if one of those inspectors comes in on their shift, I guarantee you they'll grab them and say, hey, what do you do in case of a fire? What do you do in case of tornado? What do you do in case of any of those things? You want to make sure that they're trained on that as well. All right. So before I go any further, any questions of any of that stuff? It's pretty straightforward. Yeah. So actually putting them into use. Off-hour schedule, which I've mentioned several times. The whole reason that the specialist makes sense financially is because he's going to save you money on downtime. I guarantee you in a large hospital, and probably most hospitals across the nation, your radiology director can tell you how much money per hour they lose when a CT is down. And that's if you have more than one CT and are not converted because you only have one CT for ED. Right? I can guarantee you that in an OR setting, if you have a room down, the director or the manager can tell you how much money they're losing per hour by not being able to have cases in that room. So by doing this off hours, we can show them that we're not working during that normal time where they're making money. And we can go from there. There are a few exceptions to that, of course. If you have critical access hospitals, they've got one CT. At some point, they're going to have to be on diversion, right? Because you're going to have to do that PM. But again, if you're off hours, then we'll be able to say, hey, what's your lowest census? Well, Sunday morning at 2 in the morning. Okay, we'll do the PM then. Right? Well, the PM specialist, you're not getting somebody out of the normal routine to go do that. Right? They say, hey, we got a guy who's on third shift, and this is what he'll do it then. Sunday, that's great. Second, third shift schedules. You can work a second shift depending on the modality, but I find that most of the stuff that benefits from second shift, you will want to consider a third shift simply because you're going to want a handoff, which we'll talk about, and you'd like a little bit of overlap in that when that person's getting off so that they can talk to whoever is there for the day shift to say, hey, here's what I found. PM's completed, no problems, or hey, it's starting to drift a little bit. We might want to look into doing some troubleshooting on this, that, or the other thing, depending on of course. But again, I go back to imaging. Yeah, passed all the tests, but I've noticed the KB, the last 2 PMs is starting to walk a little bit. We might want to just kind of take a look and see what's going on. Again, I talked about this a little bit. You can shift it a little bit based on availability, and you might have, like we talked about the ED, CT census. Might want to do that at a certain time. Well, there might be a doctor that just uses a piece of equipment all the time, and you just jump in there the minute he goes on vacation. But you have to have his vacation schedule so you can schedule that out. For PM specialist, I would suggest a 4-day or a 3-day week with 10 or 12 hour shifts. This does a couple things. Number one, it gives them a reason to work off shift, has a little bit of a benefit, right? They're only working 4 days and they're only working 3 days. But it also allows them a little more time for when they get mid-PM and something isn't right, and that calibration they started, that's a 2-hour calibration, turns into an 8-hour calibration, right? So that gives them those longer shifts, gives them more time to actually complete a PM that maybe doesn't go quite perfectly. Or if depending on what you're doing, maybe you can complete 2 or 3 PMs comfortably without rushing, right? So come on, sit down. It's all cool. So with the PM, you know, so you want to make sure they have plenty of time to complete that PM and do the documentation, right? There's no reason somebody working 3rd shift doing PMs shouldn't document as they go, right? We understand during the day to call every different direction. There's no reason that somebody working a 3rd shift on a 12-hour shift or a 10-hour shift should be able to complete a PM and document that PM in its entirety. Turnover plan. Now this, like I was saying, 3rd shift, it's nice to have an overlap in the morning. 2nd shift, you want to make sure that early enough that you have an afternoon overlap. But ideally, they finish their day, they have a half hour where they can do a half an hour to an hour, they can talk and say, hey, here's what's been done, here's everything's running, or hey, I ran into these issues, I couldn't do the PM for this reason, so I moved to the next item on the list and did the other PM. And here's why, here's what needs looked at, right? The turnover plan is critical. Because basically have somebody or buddies, it doesn't could be more than one person, working off shift, and we've all seen this, where the turnover doesn't happen and the person working the day 2 hours later gets a call saying, what's going on? Because for whatever reason, they had a late start date in that department, and the first patient that walks in, somebody left the service switch on, right? Something silly like that, but we don't know. And so we spend another hour trying to figure that out. The written documentation work completed, so like if they are documenting, as they should be, that means even without the face-to-face turnover, there should be, if nothing else, a written note saying these were completed, or email that says these were completed. And then if Alejandro walks in, the next morning says these are completed, you can go pull it up in your system and say, okay, yeah, I see where you're documented, see what the readings are, I see everything's okay. So I shouldn't have a problem. Or if it wasn't completed, he's got an email that says why it wasn't completed. But that turnover is critical because you have your day crew, depending on them or her or them, to complete that work. So it takes their load off. They can deal with the day-to-day emergencies, the fires, the long-term plans, long-term programs. Right? And documentation of evidence of abuse and misuse of equipment. This is really important. And I think CMS, this is my opinion at this point, just to make sure we're all clear, CMS is going to make a bigger deal out of this, right? Because one of the things they're trying to do is cut down costs of the patient being in the hospital. That's why we have reduced stay initiatives, right? That's why we have all the things that we have to try and cut costs by CMS. One of them is going to be the abuse of the equipment. If we can show that it's been abused, first of all, if we show it's been abused on a regular basis, that tells us that we need applications to come back in. We need to help our people who are operating the equipment to get the training they need to make sure they're operating it properly, right? But we have to have that documentation. If I go to a CEO and go, here is every 3 months we're replacing the same cover because they're driving tables into this. Or every month we're replacing a probe because they're dropping it on the floor, right? If I can show that, I show the documentation, it's data. You know, C-suite loves, they love data. They love some data. So if you give them that kind of data, then you can say, hey, we need your help to get this straight. And then your C-suite can do 1 or 2 things. They can ignore you and risk what will happen after that. They can say, hey, this is a great contribution. Let's get on that. All right? Let's bring everybody in. But it's important that when you approach, and this is some soft skill stuff for those who don't know. It's important when you approach from the aspect of, hey, let's help. We're here to help. Right? This kind of documentation is going to help you help. You go, hey, look, it's not our fault, it's broke. That's not going to go over simple. But you say, hey, we've documented this, we see this trend, we want to help fix it. Here's some suggestions. Maybe you got better ideas than I do. Right? All right. We're still on implementation. You wouldn't believe how many people have somebody come to work after hours and they get to the door, they can't get in. Right? So we're going to make sure they get after hours access to the equipment specifically, to the shop. Now, this is an internal person. You definitely make sure they have access to all the things that they might use once in a while, right, for your shop. Third party, this is going to be a little different, or manufacturers will be a little different. But you also, if it's an in-house guy, you got to have access to a place to sit down and eat lunch. Right? I keep saying he, forgive me, I mean he or she, because one of my most outstanding people in the world, she's sitting right there. And she's awesome. She's my lead tech, and she makes sure that she's the reason that the hospital opens in the morning. Right? So, but make sure they have access to the break room. Start with the most expensive equipment. Now, when I say most expensive, I'm not talking about cost of equipment. I'm talking about the most expensive client. Most expensive equipment, as far as dollars per hour. How many dollars per hour are you losing if we shut this piece of equipment down, whatever it is, right? I mean, it might be the MRI, but it might be something else in your hospital, right? Your hospital might be one of those ones that has an MRI, doesn't use that often. But you're using something else and you're just cranking through. And so that's the one you're going to lose the money on if it's down. Start with that and work your way down.
Well, there's other ones too. Yep. Like a tissue processor goes down, and there's all these surgeons that had done procedures the day before that are waiting for the results from the pathologist.
Absolutely.
So that's more than just dollars. That's your
exactly. Well, but then you're still talking dollars too, because they can't process. And so some of these dollars are going to be soft dollars. I want you to understand that. With your equipment, sometimes we're going to be talking about hard dollars that we can say this is actually cash in the barrel. And other times we're going to be talking about soft money, which is like you're saying, yeah, this piece of machine's down. Directly, we're not getting a whole lot of money for it, but we can't do 7 other procedures that do make a lot of money for it. Exactly. Then, and when you get in the lab, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. Well, that's exactly the same thing. Like I said, like I've been in a hospital where they had an MRI, and they had 1 or 2 MRIs a day, but they had a CT that ran from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 or 8 o'clock every night, right? So obviously the MRI wasn't the most expensive one in that imaging group. They also had a interventional radiology suite they almost never used, right? But their floor room, they did more barium swallows, right? So you would think it's just a generic floor room. But when that was down, they were losing more money than when their interventional radiology was down, right? So you got to go to your hospital. You got to talk to your, in my case, director of radiology, but you'll know the person in your hospital to talk to and say, hey, what's making us the most money? What would you, if you could pick one item, what item would you like to never have to shut down during the day for PMs? And after they give you the list of 27, you say, no, I said 1. That's where I need to start, was that 1, right? So that would be the way I would do it. That's the way that I'm trying to, because I'm in the process putting my hospital or region, whichever, to implement an imaging PM specialist for CTs and MRs, right? So we're going to run all these numbers, and we're going to hopefully have one, hospitals move at speed and move that. So, but the whole idea is to get talking about it. But for us, we have to go through each hospital and say, okay, so if we're doing 3 different hospitals, yeah, this hospital we use MR CT all the time. That's critical, but what's critical in the smaller hospital, right? Same kind of thing. It's what they're all using.
It's inexpensive. I mean, it's relevant as a stretcher sound for a small survey center.
And that could be exactly. That could be exactly. Like I'm saying, I talk imaging, but it could be any equipment. Any equipment, if you have enough of it, or if it's critical, right? Yeah. And that's what it comes down to. It could be OR tables, right? I know smaller surgery places don't have the extra tables that we have with the facility around. We have quite a few tables. But the smaller places, they may have 1 table per room and that's it. And one of those goes down, the room's down. And that can become pretty critical. So again, that's going to be on the front end when you're getting ready to put this together, because they'll be able to tell you what they'll lose per hour or per day if that equipment isn't working or it's taken down for preventive maintenance. Because again, preventive maintenance can be scheduled, right? So this is stuff that we can, this isn't surprise work, this is stuff we can schedule in advance. Right? So these are the ones, these are all imaging I'm talking about. Like I said, I'm talking specifically the typical order of imaging equipment. So let's talk about ROI. Now, this is where the math starts. This is where you start being able to show people how we're going to save them money. All right. So we take the cost of downtime during working hours per hour. The real time required for preventive maintenance. Now we all know we can start with what the manufacturer says. The manufacturer says, oh, it takes 8 hours. But we know for a fact that while we're running a calibration, we can also run the vacuum because we're skilled. Right? So maybe it only takes 7 hours. So that's the number we're going to use. Well, have a seat, man. All right? Okay. So we want to base it on a realistic expectation of what that time is really going to be. Now, we also had those PMs, like when a new bed head fell on a guy in the VA, where a 8-hour PM, because they didn't change the PM, and said it was 10 hours, but it was more like 16 because you had to check the torque on every bolt in the new bed camera. We have to know what those really are. Right? But the manufacturer's stated time is a good place to start if you don't know. Downtime cost times the PM time times the number of units times the number of PMs per year. Right? So I just gave an example with CT. This was an actual number I got from the director of radiology of Kettering Health Network back when I worked there. When I was looking at this, he said it was $10,000 an hour during the day. My CT's down any one of the 4. Because those would run from 7 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night. And the PM time for those particular ran about 6 hours for us. We actually had documented how long we were doing them. So we calculated 6 hours times 4 CT units. $960,000 a year in lost revenue based on what the radiologist told us. You guys excited? That's what it is. Once it's all done, just leave it up in the phone. You get the So, almost $1 million, we use round numbers, a year was lost, according to the radiologist, or excuse me, director of radiology, because we were shut down for PMs. So, we do have some modifiers to these. Now, that's just the basic. I want to make sure that we're being candid and transparent. That's based on 100% of patients not seen during downtime going someplace else. Now, in the particular area we were at in Kettering, they'd go 2 miles down the street to a competitor, and they'd get a CT done the same day. So they lost 100%. They calculated 100% loss when the unit was down. But maybe you're a little more rural, and that modifier is going to be maybe you only lose 20% of your patients who aren't seen that day. So maybe you're going to multiply all that by 0.8. We're down to 0.5. Something like that. So we understand how I'm calculating that number? Because the location, your radiology director should know. If they don't know, there's somebody in your hospital who knows, maybe a market manager, someone like that. But typically, the person running radiology knows it. If I don't see this person today, what's the likelihood that we're going to actually have them come back tomorrow or whenever we reschedule them and not go down the street? Also has to do with acuity, right? If you're seeing a lot of very sick patients, they're not going to wait to get treated. They'll drive a couple hours if they have to, even a rural hospital, because of the stress of having whatever it is that they're really sick with. I mean, if someone's sitting there with a broken arm, they're gone. It doesn't matter anyway, right? So, realistic. Typically going to be between 0.5 and 0.9. And, you know, here's just an example. We would have had 240,000, but because of the modifier, they only lost about half of them. It's only 120,000. This gives you real numbers, right? Especially if you're willing to go in and say, we calculated it out. They said it's 100% loss. That's how they calculate it. And so these are real numbers, right? And by the way, all these slides will be made available so you guys will be able to have access to them afterwards. Just so you know, I mean, take pictures if you want, but you Probably don't want me to break the camera. The other thing you have to watch the radiology directors do is they'll base it on a 24-hour cycle as opposed to a working hour cycle, right? So say it's $10,000 an hour. So you're saying you make $80,000 a day. Oh no, it's $240,000 a day. Well, does that happen across 24 hours? Well, no, it happens between the working hours. So then you have to go and do a little more math and just say, okay, well, it's more than $10,000 an hour. Because they are based on a 24 cycle, and the reality is you want to find out what they're losing when they have most of their staff. There might be an exception, and again, in a small hospital, but in larger hospitals, I've seen that happen to me more than once. He should be able to give you actual numbers during working hours. If he can't, again, somebody in finance probably can. And again, just like I'm saying, you want to make sure that you're using accurate numbers so you can use accurate numbers when you're talking to the C-suite. Be that better for you or worse for you implementing this position. You still want to go up there with your integrity employees and say, listen, these are the numbers. All right? It would help or it won't help. But either way, you've done your due diligence. And maybe it won't help on this modality, but it does on this modality. We can show you why. All right. So these were the numbers I used in Kettering. If we paid somebody $150,000, which in Ohio, that's a really high rate to pay for an imaging, even a senior imaging guy. If we had $50,000 for the training, that's a lot of training, guys. A lot of training. You're probably not going to spend $50,000 a year on training. If you had $25,000 worth of tools, the cost of that guy is $225,000. So let's just round it up, say $250,000. Seems like a big number. Until we run the return on investment. So I figured with the training, we do CTs and MRs. The calculations using the formulas previously used with a 1.0 modifier, meaning that they lost 100%. 96, like I said, almost $1 million, and another $500,000 with the MRIs. Right? If we add both of those up and minus the cost, the first year shows about $1.25 million savings in lost downtime. This is why I use the imaging side, because it shows big numbers and it shows how impactful this can be, right? So even if you go to a 0.5 modifier for our cost doesn't change for the cost of the pain specialist, right? It's still the same. We still save in the first year $500,000 in downtime. That's a big chunk of money. So in theory, that's going to be, $500,000 more income, raw income, right? Not necessarily after they take out their cost, but raw income, $500,000. So, and that's including the training and the tools the first time around. Now, there'll still be tool costs for not tools. There'll still be more training eventually, but you're not going to have that same startup cost. So you have another $75,000 the years following. If you want to do a 3-year, what you do is you simply don't include the cost of training and tools in the second and third year. Everyone understand that? And then so you're showing the cost of salary benefits, you maybe showing an incidental cost for more training or more tools. It's not going to be the same high number. And you show a 3-year, roughly, on this particular example, what was it? It was somewhere in $4 million in 3 years. Actually, it was like 3 point, now it's more like 3.5.
Life expectancy of the CAT scan.
So the CAT scans depends on who calculates it. I always say calculate 10 years, you should buy a new one. But if they don't, which I don't know, because you can still support it, they're going to fit up to 15. Bobby, what's the longest CT you got you're servicing right now? 20-year-old? You got somebody around 20 years?
PM's paid off.
Yeah, it'll more than pay off for the CT, buy the whole CT, right? So, assume the guy's still there 20 years. But still, even if you have to reintroduce it, you're still looking at those numbers. So even if you hired a new PM specialist every year, had to train them buy new tools, you're still seeing a significant savings just on the downtime. Now, for those of you who work in the medical center, you understand the turn and burn, how many patients come through your facilities, right? It's a ton. Anybody who hasn't been down to a medical center, you should go down and just watch for a day. It's insane. It's something, I think it's 90,000 people work there every day, something like that. Does that sound right? So, I mean, it's the same.
You can also forecast a repair that down the road so that you can also schedule that in.
Absolutely. And you can expand the program if it fits. You can scale it back if you suddenly, you know, if you suddenly get on new CTs. Well, you're not going to really have control of that for the first year, right? Make sure you guys don't miss lunch. So, you're really looking at, I mean, now, I picked this picture. I'll tell you the story. I picked this picture because I typed in serendipity. This picture was under serendipity. I don't know what it is. But it's pink and it's beautiful. That's what I said. That's going to be the picture I use for this. Let's see. Yeah, so I've only got a few more slides. And then I really like to have an open discussion, with questions, things like that. So let's talk about these other benefits. So some people don't want to hear this, but you should be able to reduce your daytime staff. You might be able to cut 2 for 1. Not always looking to cut positions that way, at least I'm not. But what's the biggest hassle people have during the day is trying to get PMs done. So if you take the PMs off the shoulders of the people working during the daytime, what do they have left to do? Well, they've got a lot to do in my hospital, but they suddenly are freed up to chase down those intermittent problems, right? They're freed up to handle things that they normally put aside because they've got to get that PM done because it's the last week of the month, right? So not only guys are more efficient at repairing stuff during the day, which means that we're going to have less equipment out for less periods of time in theory. This is all theory, right? That's a huge benefit. At least to me, that's a huge benefit. My guys can focus on things other than PMs during the day. I'm not saying I want it to happen that they have to make one up, right? But if they can focus on just the, hey, this is down, and come check it out. Absolutely, we're there. I mean, you have to, for those who haven't done it yet, take a minute and think about what that really means. That's huge. It's a huge deal, right? And projects. If you're in a large hospital, you know that the day the project ends or the day that they move the hospital someplace else. Right? I've always got 2 or 3 projects lined up coming in, at least. I was saying you probably have at least 2 or 3 as well, right? So at least, and that's on a week where they put, you know, capital spending on hold. Otherwise, we've got things scheduled for the next year or 2 years, right? So if we can focus on those projects, and we can focus on repairs, and we can focus on really dealing with the immediate issues during the day, changes everything. And you talk about that. I mean, think about that lab. That the only thing they're worried about, you're not shutting down. The only thing they're worried about is that their equipment breaks. Right? It's huge, especially in a large hospital. So again, I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure. But, I argue reduced corrective maintenance costs for a couple of reasons. Again, this is a theory because I haven't proved it yet. Your preventive maintenance is designed to prevent failure, and a thorough, unrushed PM should reduce mean time to failure outside of abuse. Now, why is that? Because anybody in here who's done a PM during the day has had someone standing over the shoulder going, "Can I have it yet?" And even if you are stout in your resolve, and even if you are firm in your conviction, somewhere in the back of your brain, you're going to try and speed up because you want the patient to be taken care of. And you try to balance that with, I want this to be right for the patient. But you're also got that pressure that somebody's waiting to be seen. And you know that when you sat in the waiting room, or you sat in the waiting room for a loved one, every second seems like an hour. So someone's standing over going, can we use it yet? We've got people that need this equipment. Well, if you never opt out,
During the day, your page is going off constantly.
Yeah.
Everybody else wants your attention.
As well.
At night, they're all sleeping.
Exactly. And that's the other thing is, how many times we tried to do a PM that we couldn't get done on a day shift because it was a repair that was more immediate. Right? Kind of stuff. Even if you're fully staffed, you're staffed right, quote unquote, whatever that means. You're going to run into those problems. So this whole idea of having reduced corrective maintenance, except for abuse, is, I can't believe that's anything but correct. Right? Maybe I'm wrong, but I just really can't believe that it wouldn't be better, because I know I've been that guy. So I go, no, I have to do this. I have to do it right. Otherwise, I'm not taking another patient here. So now there's some other considerations. I don't even know if I listed all of them here because there's a lot of them. Regional implementation. So if you've got a small hospital, you can't justify the numbers, but you're a part of a hospital system. Or if you're a big hospital, part of a big hospital system, maybe you go, hey, you know what? If we just get a guy who just does MRIs all year long, right? We can do it for regionally. He'll just do MRIs. And then we'll get a CT guy, he'll just do CTs. Right? If you're a big enough system or big enough hospital, you'll be able to do that. Depending on, again, on the frequency of the PMs. But even if you only had them doing those PMs that I showed, and you drank coffee the rest of the time, surf the internet, you're still saving $1 million, right? But if you keep busy, you can save more than $1 million. So you look for ways to keep busy. But that might be a regional implementation. That's the point, though, that if you do, you'll have additional costs because you'll have travel costs, right? Whether you, for bigger hospital systems, should they have a company car? Or for, independent service organizations, should they have a car? If they're not just in one location, or pay on mileage, or, so you got to figure that into your savings. But I can guarantee you it's not going to make that big of a difference. Again, highest income items can work down. So again, if it's your MRI flat, if it's not, if it's whatever that they use the most of, it could be dialysis equipment. It could be, you name it. Every department has something that's a high element. Right? Candidate selection. Here's where things get a little dicey. So preferably, it would be somebody that's already working with you or for you, that you know them. You know, they have a solid background. And this, again, this was set up for imaging. They have a solid general knowledge base of whatever your modality is. This is a couple things. You know that they can work alone if they're detail oriented, because you're talking about a person, unless you have a crew, which in some implementations you might have a crew. But is that person going to be clocking in all the time if nobody else is there? They actually want to be there when it's clocking in. Right? Are they going to pay attention to the details? Because that's the whole reason to have them on an off shift in the first place, is to help. That's one of the reasons, is to pay attention to those details. Right? And detail oriented. Are they going to pay attention to, are they a person that can work third shift, right? Are they a person that can function at midnight till 7, 8 in the morning, or 10 till 8 in the morning, or whatever the shift is, right? Are they able to at 3 in the morning go, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't look right, let me follow up on it and make sure that it's right before I go any further. Some people just can never make that switch. Some people, they're born to work that shift, right? So some people, it doesn't matter what, once they get a routine, they're fine, right? Working alone, this is a harder one, not so much because they might not do things, but because they may become disengaged when they don't have feedback and they don't have people around them to work with. There's some people who need cohorts around them just to be, because they're more social, and they just need that sense of belonging, people around them. It's, I got a master's in psychology, so I'm a hammer, everything's a nail, right? But you want to make sure that person is not one of those people who needs that interaction. Someone who can get that social aspect outside of work. Or let me go back a little bit and explain where this idea came from originally. This is not a completely original idea on my part. What happened was I knew a guy who worked at a hospital that I, as an independent service organization employee, was servicing. I would come in early to do PMs, get them started, and he would be there working on the other things that we didn't service them for. I started talking to him because I'd known him from way back, like you will in a community like this. And what had happened is his daughter had been in an accident, and his wife was working evenings, and he would work early in the morning so he could be with his daughter in the afternoons. So the company let him shift his schedule. And we started talking about how the PMs were easier for him to do, and he did most of the PMs in that little imaging area, because he was there in the morning, nobody's using the equipment. Now, this was a smaller hospital, so it didn't have high volume anyway. It just got me thinking, and that's what led to me running these numbers eventually. What, you know, makes no sense. So he was very good at working alone. He was very good at doing deal touring. He had some reason that working that shift will make a difference. So there's a lot of reasons that a person might thrive in that environment. It may just be the personality, maybe they have a reason. That's something you want to consider. Simply because you want someone who's going to be there and not have to have that constant feedback that comes. But in saying that, if you're the person who hired them, you got to make sure you're showing up early enough once in a while to talk to them, make sure they're doing okay, so what they need, right? Be the kind of person you would like to report to. Right. The PM schedule itself. If you're PMing stuff at multiple locations, I think that's it, yeah. You might want to do like units together so that if you're doing multiple modalities, once I do, even though I worked on CT, nuke med, I tried to do them in groups because once I did one nuke med camera, the second one went a little quicker, right? Because I just read through all the steps, because I read through all the steps, but I would be in a group, right? So if you're doing multimodality, that might be a consideration. But scheduling a year in advance allows you to do that kind of stuff. Right? That wasn't the button I was hoping for. I didn't see it. So the other thing I didn't talk about, and I don't remember if I put it in here or not, so I'll talk about it first, is if they're regional, you want to schedule all the locations together. Right? So if I walk into hospital A, I'm going to multiple hospitals, I want to do the CT and the MR along there if I can, if I've got enough time. Or maybe I do 2 PMs in that location so that I'm not eating at travel time or eating at mileage during that time if it can be avoided. I'm not saying it'll be perfect all the time, but if you schedule it so you're doing it in geographic groups, it would also be more cost effective. If you're big enough that you have multiple modality, the same modality at each location, it just makes sense to go from one to the next to the next to the next. But a little bit of forethought in planning a year in advance and communicating that to the directors so that they're aware when, you know, that morning, if they walk in the morning after you do the PM and something doesn't look right, they don't mess around for an hour trying to figure out what's wrong. They just call and say, hey, something's not right, so we can go and see what's the service switch is still on. Right, so we now for another hour. Okay. The money saved, I mean, downtime, cannot be accounted for the department that's doing the PM all the time. I know in our situation, we might save the hospital $1 million, but my department's not going to show that on my budget. So when I base my budget, they're not going to, they won't look at it and instantly know, oh yeah, but they're saving $1 million by running this. That's going to be a fight I have to fight every year and remind them and make sure everybody's well aware of it. And anytime there's turnover, the C-suite or the financial chain, that I go talk to them and make sure they understand why I have this person with this expense. So that they understand that that's saving the big bucket of money smaller, even though my pail is a little bigger, right? Sounds, you know, people are, oh, it's finance. Yeah, trust me, a lot of what we do, if anybody here, I see directors and managers here, it comes back to money a lot of times. That's patient safety followed by how much does it cost to keep the patient safe. All right. Soft money. All right. I'm not actually bringing more money in. And this is one thing to know. Well, what if that day that you're doing the PM, for whatever reason, 3 people cancel? Okay, that's one day out of how many years we're going to do this. I'll talk about averages. I can't guarantee you that people will not cancel cases every day that I do the PM. I can't guarantee that. All right? I just can't. But we're based on the averages that you're giving me, and you're telling me when I want to take it down for PMs, that's costing me this much money. So I'm using your numbers, the same ones you use, to tell me I can't take this machine down. This is a big one. We get into a PM, we find out there's a problem. 2 in the morning, I figured out, oh, I can't let this unit go back into service. There's a problem that hurts somebody. the AE stop doesn't work, right? Can't shut it down if there's an emergency. Can't put it back into service. I don't know if it's going to be fixed by the time they want to start. I don't think so. What's your plan? For me, it would be an escalation that would follow just as if the machine was broken in the middle of the night, right? It would step up and so everyone knows and everyone can make plans accordingly. But on some equipment that they don't use it, ever use at night, they know if it's broken before they leave. That's going to take a little education at the front end when you're setting this all up. Say, hey, here's our procedure. Here's what we're going to do to let you know. And the minute that we can order the part, order the part. Now, establishing that clear procedure, let me see what I said. You have to make this decision. I said PM specialist doesn't fix after-hour parts. Now, if you've only had PM training on whatever the unit is, you're not going to be able to fix it anyway. So your on-call person would have to come in and deal with it as it was broken at the end of the day or in the middle of the night or whenever you do the troubleshooting. Right? Now, these situations hopefully won't happen often, so it would vary from situation to situation, hospital to hospital, your system. But you want to make sure you know, what do they do? If it happens to be you took one of your CT, old CT guys who knows more about CT than you'll ever know, and he's a PM guy, maybe you had him troubleshoot it because he was scheduled to do that PM that night, right? And then you can hand it over in the morning. But that's your call for you need to set that up before you run into that problem. So that if he's supposed to call the on-call person, everybody knows, calls the on-call person, they show up, that person goes on to the next PM. All right. If it requires a significant repair, same thing. Or if it breaks down the day before that person's supposed to come up with PM, how do you deal with that? You want to have that procedure in place when you implement this program, because it will happen. So go on to next PM, what do you do? And then how do you reschedule? So I'm supposed to do a PM tonight on a CT. It breaks down at 3 in the afternoon. They got to order parts. It won't be fixed for a day, at least. Okay, I'm working a 4-day week. Do I adjust it on to the next night? What do? You have to have a plan in place for that. And make sure that everybody knows that. Yes, right.
Question for
Yep.
Does the specialist move on to another?
Yep.
If somebody only has 2 MRIs, you just took one down.
Right. And see, that's where you have to have a plan. Because, like you're saying, if they've only got 2 and we just took one down, well, no, he's not going to go on to the next PM. So what does he do? Was he multimodality? Well, with only 2 MRIs, probably. So we look and see what PM is next on the list that they can do within the time frame, because we all know that they have to be done within a specific time frame. We can't just say, hey, you know what? Let's got a PM due in 6 months. I'll just do it now. We know that's not so we can't do that, right? That's what we have to be aware, and we have to be flexible. And then this position, again, our next position, we have to be flexible too, because you're exactly right. What if we only have? What if we go on? We do that PM on the CT at Sunday morning, and while we're doing the calibration, the tube blows. But that's their only CT because they're critical access, now they're on diversion. Well, we have to have a plan in place to deal with that. Each location is going to be different. I'm not going to go into the weeds on that, but you're exactly right. Those are the considerations we have to have. Right? This is a big one. If something goes wrong, who will we notify? And when are they notified? And under what severity? Now, I'm talking imaging equipment, but maybe it's something that you save a lot of money on, but they don't want to know till the morning because they'll just deal with it. But you want that in writing if they tell you that. They don't want to be woken up in the middle of the night. You want that in writing in the procedure. That's how that's done. Right? Because, okay, well, some things will work with limited, like maybe you have a PM on a unit that has an option. The option's not functioning now. You can still do all your normal studies safely. You just can't complete this other. Do we notify them or wait till the morning? Right. There's a whole bunch of scenarios I wouldn't be able to cover, but the ones that you want to cover with your specific equipment. Right? Because otherwise, it's not leaving alerts, and it will happen if you don't plan for it. Right? Because what's the first thing I'd go back to this? It's like anytime I went to a training school, I would say, what is it that never breaks? When they told me, I said, okay, you know, everything there is about that. Because that will break for me, right? Exactly. So the same thing. If this happens, what do? We want to know, oh, it never happened. Well, just let's say it did. Let's make a plan. And you can't plan for every contingency. That's why you'd also have to have just like a general escalation. If something that we didn't plan on happens, what do? That pretty much should be what the escalation plan is anyway. So, see how fast I was? Was I way too fast? This is the part that gets interesting because I hit the hour mark. Woo! So, any questions, any comments, any ideas, anything you guys want to talk about? Yes, sir. So the key is they have to trust you to hire the right person. Is usually the big thing, because they have to be able to trust that person's PM is not going to cause them more problems, right? So that's one of the reasons that if you take a guy you already have, or a person you already have, that's ideal. If not, you have to make sure that there's trust building. And what I would suggest, if you're bringing somebody into the team from outside, is you eat the cost of having to work a day schedule for a couple months, right? Because then you get a chance to have that camaraderie. You have that chance for them to build that teamwork. And maybe it takes longer than a couple months, but you want to sit aside and be willing to eat the cost of not implementing it right away. You can build that into your cost as well if that's what you need to do. Yes, sir.
One of the little areas on informing customers. I mean, you bought this at night, oftentimes, so it's not transparent to your customers. You actually had service contracts lost because of that, because you had your service guys like little houses goes to the night, sneaks in, the system works, and all it never breaks. So you have to manage the team in the hospital or the facility you're at, like, why am I paying all this money for support down there? Because it never breaks. And that's one of the things that we try to get the service engineers to communicate to the group in the hospital. Hey, this is what we've done for you.
Exactly. And that's something that, again, you have to sell over and over, because once everything's running smoothly, people start looking at where can they cut money. They go, why do we got somebody working for a shift? Exactly. Exactly. And that's one of the big things that has to do with selling the idea to the C-suite. Yes, sir. So that goes back to hiring the right person. So there's two ways you can go about that, in my opinion. You can either find a guy who's like, you know what I want to do for the next 5 to 10 years? I want to coach to retirement. I've got experience, and that's the kind of guy that's great if he's just like, hey, I'm happy just doing this and then going home and living my life, because that's, you know, I want this to be right. I like my job. I don't want to have the daily turn and burn. Or you realize this is going to turn over every 5 years, and this is the way into your company, and you explain to the person that you're bringing on board, listen, this is a 5-year deal. You may be lucky and find out that they love it, they don't want to leave that. Or in 5 years, maybe that's how they come in, and then you're going to fill back to that position. Or maybe they have first consideration if there's a position open, right? That is the thing that takes it. Again, it comes back to the type of person it is. Just doing PMs. I think maybe we as a community need to have a conversation about that. Just doing PMs, right? If we're actually preventing downtime from normal use, that's huge. That doesn't consider just the patient in front of us. That considers the next 50 patients, or the next 100 patients who don't get their service interrupted because we took the time to sit in the corner when nobody was looking and do what we're supposed to do. Tell my team, we're like the men in black, right? When we do our job right, nobody knows we're there.
And also push them in the tech doing PMs should know more about the piece of equipment that the tech group prepares. Yep. At a later time, they can switch back to the day shift and prepare tech.
That's something else that you might want to look at too, is this is just my rendition of this, right? This is my rendition of what I put out there. Maybe it's a rotating position. Maybe it's a 6-month position on, a year off. Maybe it's month on, month off, depending on what works for you and what you have available. Maybe you have guys, you say, hey, you know what, I got a strong CT team, we got a strong UR team, we can schedule it. So, hey, guess what? One of the CT guys is working nights for the next month for all the PMs. The next month it's MR, and then we're all day scheduling again. Depending on what your numbers are. You gotta run those numbers again. If I were coming to a place, I go, oh, you know what, I can't quite justify having this as a year-round position. But maybe I can do that. Or hey, you know what, for the next 3 months you're working nights, but you're working 4 10s or 3 12s. We're gonna pay for it. Right? But you're not gonna all the PMs. And then I do it for another quarter. Right? You don't have to stick ideal. I mean, this is the ideal, like, how this can be modified to your needs. I have to say something now, because I forget sometimes that we're not all in the same state. Look at your state's labor laws, make sure you're not violating your labor laws with how you set this up. Sometimes when you run a 312, there's a whole bunch of considerations in some states that you don't have in others. So make sure you with your HR people, and they understand what you're doing. Sure.